Well, generally during these type of conversations, I mean, one, the person's right next to me. I get a drink, I get their favorite drink, and we just share it, right? And just I've been drinking a ton of soda, which I love. Not good for me, obviously, but if you could pick a drink, like your top drink right now, what would it be?
So right now, because it is 8:30 a.m., my wife
Right,
actually
right.
just as I was walking out the door made me a little smoothie. So I
Oh,
I
nice.
I am definitely on the you call it soda. We call it fizzy drink or just name the brand like Coke or Fanta or whatever. Um,
Got
but I'm full into that as well at the moment. But at 8:30 in the morning, not on the top of my list. But yeah, right now smoothie's good. But look, when it comes to just generally speaking, um, look, my favorite is or when it comes to like soda. Oh, geez, my phone just fell over. Um,
all good.
Mountain Dew is my go-to. But
Ew.
I I don't I don't seem to have it all that often. Pepsi Max is kind of like my main soda. But yeah,
Awesome.
root beer.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love root beer. Root beer is like yeah, there you go. If I was to like pick like my top like root beer, but it's um yeah, it's very uncommon in Australia. You don't find root beer. We do have ginger beer, which is it's completely different taste or similar-ish, but ginger beer is quite good. Yeah, anyway.
root beer though,
But yeah,
when you were here in California in the States, did root beer taste different compared to the root beer in Australia?
so root beer in Australia is not a thing. Like you have to get it from like specialized like stores, and it's
Oh,
like
wow.
A&W or what's the other
Uh,
brand that you guys have? Yeah, so it's the same
of
thing.
Marks.
It's stores importing it from America. So yeah,
I gotcha. Wow,
yeah, yeah,
interesting. I didn't know that. I know a lot of people don't like root beer because it tastes like medicine. There's some root
yeah,
beers that do taste like that, and so I'm sure people outside, because all my family in Guatemala are like, that root beer sucks. Like it tastes straight like medicine. I don't know how you guys can drink that. So just curious if
yeah.
there's any
Okay.
different. Australia
Do you
imports
have
that, so I
do you
gotcha.
have something over there called sarsaparilla?
What is it?
Sarsaparilla.
No, what is that?
It's kind of so it's something that we have here. Again, it's super uncommon, but um, maybe you might say it's like an Australian version of root beer. It's a similar flavor. People call it SARS for short. Um,
Okay.
it is very like it very very medicine kind of tasting. Um,
Uh, is
yeah,
that one
I
popular
actually
or
haven't
not
had
really?
it for no, 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 not popular at all. I can't even remember the last time I've seen it, let alone had it. Um, yeah, but I was
Crazy.
wondering, yeah,
A lot of huge differences. One of the differences I was curious, I was curious about because this whole conversation's a lot of like retrospective, thought provoking type questions where it's like, hey, let's talk about your younger self versus the person you are now, the goals that you wanted to have, the career that you wanted to have, the actual career and goals that you have accomplished now. So, with that said, though, is what's the high school equivalent um, in Australia compared to the US, right? Because we've got high school grades
yeah,
11, 12. What's that like in Australia?
yeah. So you guys have middle school. We don't have middle school. So we have primary school, which is we call like prep, grade one, two, three, four, five, six. So primary school goes up to grade six, and then high school is from 7 to 12. Um, and then
Whoa.
yeah, yeah. Um, and there are some schools that have what they call like a middle school, but it's not really a thing in Australia. Um, and so yeah, end of year 12, you do a big exams and stuff, and you get uh, when I did it was called an enter score. It's now called an ATAR score, and that score kind of helps you then get into different university courses and stuff like that. And then yeah, you might do university for a couple of years and then go into your career, that kind of thing. I did some uni for short. I did some uni, but I never finished uh, what I was studying, and I've just have gone into my career now without.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm interested in that. So in your I guess like your high school, the 7 through 12, what did you want to do when you graduated?
Yeah, so I think I didn't really know what I wanted to do until probably like year 10 or year 11. And I very much wanted to go do down like the accounting route. I was Initially it was accounting, and then I was kind of tossing up between accounting and financial planning. Um,
Oh,
and there was a couple people that I knew in my life that were successful accountants, and a couple people that I knew that were successful financial planners. And the whole kind of pitch that I got from financial planners was accounting is looking in the past and financial
mhm,
planning is looking in the future. And I kind of like
yeah,
that kind of concept. They kind of sold the idea to me. So then I was like wanting to go down the financial planning route. And so that's what I was studying at uni. I was doing a Bachelor of Business Commerce in accounting and finance, which kind of encompassed, accounting and financial planning. Um,
yeah.
but it's not that I didn't enjoy accounting or financial planning anymore. I just hated school. I hate studying. I'm, uh, yeah, just
Just wasn't your
university
thing.
just yeah, uni just didn't work for me. So I I didn't finish, and I just kind of worked some odd jobs. Like when I came back from the States, when I was living in California, um, I just picked up like some odd jobs and here and there, and kind of like fell into a particular job where I was like helping other businesses improve their customer service, kind of random,
Oh,
and actually kind of flew around Australia. Sorry, flew around the world doing that. We had clients in
well,
Dubai and Singapore and
that's
India.
kind of
So that was kind of
a big
cool, like
deal.
the traveling aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it was not like this career that I wanted to get into. And um, yeah, then my wife was like short after we got married, she was like, "Oh, why don't you try like real estate?" And then that kind of whole conversation started, and that's kind of where I'm at now. If you want to shift towards that, or if you want to stick on the high school thing, that was my high school kind of where I was at
Your
high school wise. Yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
makes a lot of sense. So,
yeah.
with the odd jobs, before we jump into like what you do now, with those odd jobs, were there any of those that like kind of stuck out to you where you thought maybe you'd dive into and like, oh, I could probably do this? Or were they all just like, I know this is temporary, I'm gonna move on to the next thing eventually?
Yeah. So I when I first got back from America, I did furniture removal, and I knew that was something that didn't want to do long term.
Yeah.
In fact, what made me stop that was I broke my wrist snowboarding. Couldn't lift heavy
Oh shoot.
stuff anymore, so
Yeah.
stopped that. And then I kind of fell into this that job I explained, like helping businesses with their customer service, and I enjoyed that. But um, like so, having just recently gotten married at the time, and I was like traveling around a lot. It was just something that we didn't want in our relationship. Me going overseas for a week here and there, and I would also travel around
Yeah.
Australia a bit. And so, again, I liked the job. It was never something that I was like aspiring to do, but I could have seen myself like going down that route, I suppose. But yeah, the travel aspect as a single person, it was fun. But
Yeah.
in a marriage, it just didn't wasn't what we wanted in a
That
marriage. So
makes that makes a lot of sense. Do you think if you were single, you'd still be doing that job?
yeah. Oh, geez, good question. I mean, this is now going on like 8 years or so ago. Would I
Oh
still
wow.
be doing it? I would like to say I'd hope not, because um, I mean, this the ceiling in that, like, I make a lot more money now doing what I do than I would have even if I was doing that for the
Yeah.
last 8 years and working my way up. So I'd like to say I hope not, but maybe. Yeah, don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows,
Yeah,
right? But it's
yeah,
interesting to think about. If I didn't get
yeah,
married, what would my life look like right now? I know
yeah, yeah.
I know my
Correct.
life would look so different if I never got married. If I was still single.
Yeah,
But anyways, let's talk about you now then. So you jumped into real estate. I do real estate here in the US. I am so curious to hear the differences, how it looks like over there in Australia. But before we jump into
yeah,
that, how did you
Yeah,
get into real estate? How'd that work out?
yeah, cool. I'm curious to have this conversation as well because my understanding it does work a little bit different. Um, so yeah, my wife was like, we're kind of brainstorming. Okay, well, don't want to do this job flying overseas all the time anymore. What are some things that we want that I want to do? And she kind of suggested real estate. And so when it comes to real estate, there's kind of two main aspects in Australia. There's the property management side of things, and there's the sales
Yeah,
side of things.
right.
And immediately in Australia, when you think real estate, you think sales. Um, and in Australia, sales guys, they often work like Saturdays and Sundays. Um, Look, at the time, I thought agents worked on Sundays a lot more than they actually do. So that was kind of what steered
Uh-huh.
me away from going down the sales route. Was I didn't want to work Sundays primarily, but I didn't want to work all weekend. Um,
Yeah.
Again, I've since found out that most agents don't really work Sundays, but that's what kind of
Oh,
steered me down the property management route of things, right? It's a bit more of a kind of a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 type of thing. You do
yeah.
work some Saturdays, but so in Australia, there's just like a course that you need to do, and you can kind of most companies you can just do it in your own pace. So you might get it done in 2 weeks, you might get it done in a month, it might take you 6 months, depending on how, So I think
Yeah.
it took me like maybe like 2 months to do it. And
Wow.
once you do that course, you are uh, you can work in real estate basically. So then applied for a few jobs. Actually, the first job I got in real estate, I was what's called a leasing consultant, which is under the property management umbrella, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't actually like manage properties. I just opened properties for inspection, and that's all I really
Uh,
did, right?
yeah.
So I opened the property managers' properties to let people through to inspect and stuff like that.
Ah, I gotcha.
Um,
I gotcha.
yeah, and I actually got fired from that job after
You
like
could fire.
4 months. I got fired. I still have no idea why. I was still under, like in Australia, when you start a new job, you typically are under like a probation period, which is
Uh-huh.
normally like 6 months. So your boss can
Hmm.
fire you within that 6 month period without giving you a reason. Like they don't need to justify anything.
Really?
They can just say, "Yeah, you're gone." And yeah, like I consider myself a good a good employee. I've got no idea why they fired me. Um,
After
yeah,
4 months.
and I really like I enjoyed the job. It was a good kind of step in the door. Anyway, that I then applied for another job. I got a job as an assistant property manager, where I'm like
Uh-huh.
helping a property manager basically do their job. And then in that position at that company, I moved up into a property manager and then became a senior property manager, where I then had an assistant. And yeah, how it works in Australia, basically, like a property manager will maybe manage like 150, 200 properties. And yeah, you're managing obviously the tenant, getting the tenant to pay rent, and managing electricians and plumbers, and doing routine inspections, going to the property every 6 months to make sure they're
Right.
keeping it in a good condition, etc., etc. So that's kind of
That's
that's my
right
first.
now. That's what you're doing right now.
No, no, no. So I did that. So I was in the property management space for maybe like 4 years.
Whoa,
Um,
4 years. It's a long time.
yeah, about that. Yeah, and so from residential property management, I moved into commercial property management, which there's
Mm.
so like I was managing. Oh, geez, I was managing like cafes and restaurants and businesses, that kind of thing.
Right.
Completely
Yeah.
different set of laws in Australia, residential versus commercial, and it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
quite different. But that's typically like the career progression if you do want to make more money in the property management space. You kind of move into commercial. Um,
I gotcha.
so while I was doing residential and commercial property management, I was working a second job in the evening. So I would work property management kind of 9 to 5, and then I would At night, I would do appointments. So I had a second job where I would go into people's houses and talk to them about retirement. Um, Ask them how they were tracking of reaching their financial goals. And most people in Australia think they're tracking okay, but they're not. Um, so I would talk to them about opportunities for investing. And most people were primarily interested in investing in real estate. So what I would then do is I would then refer them through to another company, not the property management company that I was working for. I would refer them through to another company that would help people buy investment properties. So all about the
Ooh,
numbers and the data and the research, right?
right.
So I'm doing these two jobs I was doing two jobs for about 3 years. And so with that night job, I would get paid if the client, the company that I referred them through to see, if they then went on and bought a property with that company, I would get paid a commission from that. Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So fast forward 3 years of doing the two jobs, the company that I would refer people through to for my night job offered me a job to work with them in their office, which basically meant that I would be selling investment properties to their clients. Okay.
Ooh,
And so
okay.
I had to decide, okay, I'm working two jobs right now. And obviously, with two jobs means two sets of income, basically, for
Right.
myself. Do I want to do this, or do I want to just work one job in their office and do that full time, kind of thing? And the potential to make money doing that is quite high. It's very commission based. If you're good, you can make a lot of money. So I started
Yeah.
doing that, and that's what I do now. I don't work for that company anymore. I started working for another company almost a year ago. But yeah, basically what I do is I meet with people over Zoom. Um, they've been referred through to us by a third party,
Wow.
and they're somewhat interested in property investing. I kind of pitch them on our strategy and our business, and if they like the idea of moving forward with us and having me help them buy a property, I then help them buy a property, and um, and yeah, and then I get paid commission. So I help people buy
Whoa.
properties based purely on the numbers, the data, the research. It's not something that they're going to live in themselves. So I help people all over Australia buy properties all over Australia.
Wow.
So yes, that's kind of what I do now.
You eventually ended up getting into the transaction side of things with real estate.
Yeah, correct. But it's different to like typical real estate agent. So typical real estate agents in Australia do like open houses and auctions. I don't know if auctions are popular where you live, um,
A
but
little
I
different,
don't
but
do
yeah.
any of that. Yeah, I don't do any of that. I help people. I meet with people over Zoom. I show them the property on paper. I show them the floor plan. I show them the area. I'll pull up Google Maps and show them this is where the property is. This is where the school, the shop, the train is. This is why we think the property is a good investment because of X, Y, and Z. And they buy it
Right.
sight unseen. So I work from
Whoa.
home full time. I am on Zoom all day basically. I don't go out and do open homes and any of that kind of stuff. So yes, I'm on the transaction side of things, but it's completely different to uh, standard real estate agents. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes that so you got the best of both worlds in the sense of yes, I'm doing the transactions, but I'm also not the one who's running around opening doors and talking to people about hey, open house and all that good stuff, which is
correct.
nice. You
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
really worked from anywhere then, right? Remote work.
Yeah, correct. So like last weekend we had a little getaway, um, like an hour and a half drive from our house, just in like the mountains. And I had a couple appointments on the weekend on the Saturday. I do work Saturdays, which is fine because my wife usually works Saturdays too. But yeah, I just on my laptop and did it there, and yeah,
That's awesome. That's the
yeah.
dream right there. It seems like the dream. When you hear the American dream, I don't know what your thoughts are or what like what you've heard, but the American dream back in the day was make a lot of money, buy a house, and then have a nice job, have kids, all the good stuff, like the typical dream, right? But now it seems like the shift has gone from that to being able to have disposable income to not only spend it, but also free your time up, right? Because you don't, not everybody, I'm sure some people do want to go to an office 9 to 5, nothing wrong with that. But it seems like there's a lot more and more people who are wanting to be remote, have more flexibility with their time, go and have experiences, and that's kind of the dream right there. So you're living the American dream in Australia is what it's coming down to, which is kind of
Yeah,
cool. So
it's funny because in Australia, so the big thing in Australia is owning your own home, right? Where I live, so I live in Melbourne, which is uh, about on par with the size of Sydney. It's one of the two biggest cities in Australia, and
okay.
property prices are very expensive here. Um, in fact, house prices are about 9 or 10 times the average income. Right. So
Whoa.
if average income, I don't know what the numbers are, but if average household income in Australia is $100,000 a year, the average house price is like 900 to a million. So
Ooh,
people like when my parents were like buying their house, they talk about interest rates being 18% and it was so difficult. But even back then, house prices were about 3 or 4 times the average household income.
right.
So it's a lot harder for people to buy properties. Like real estate is a way for Australians to really kind of make money, I guess, and or accumulate wealth per se. So
Uh-huh.
if you can buy a few investment properties, it's a very popular way for Australians to get to where they want to be in retirement or whatever, right?
Right.
Um, the thing that's quite different, I think, with real estate in Australia versus the States is you talk about this conversation of like passive income. There's particularly when we talk about real estate, which is what we're talking about, passive income is not really the strategy in Australia, right?
Okay.
99% of the time, if you buy a house or a property or an apartment or whatever, the cost of that property, so like the mortgage, your council rates, insurance, all of the costs of the property typically far outweigh the rent that you're going to get from that property. So
Okay.
it's not a conversation of passive income as it is more so about the growth of the asset. So the reason why you would invest in property in Australia is you buy something for $600,000 and you hold it for 10 years, and in 10 years time it's worth $1.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
the real kind of idea behind property investing in Australia. Um, Maybe
The
after some
long-term vision.
time of owning a property, it might start to become positively geared and give you a bit of a cash flow. But
Yeah.
people aren't getting rich from real estate by passive income in Australia. It's more so from
Oh,
the capital appreciation of the property.
yeah. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Yeah. In the States here in Utah specifically, that is a strategy, long-term vision, long-term hold. It's gonna
Yeah.
it's gonna appreciate. I'm gonna make money down the road. What you're saying is spot on. The biggest difference, one of the biggest differences, is there's a lot of. It seems like we're really aggressive over here, where it's like we have to find a property that's going to cash flow right now,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
that could be a good thing or bad thing because then because I do so I own the property management company and a real estate transaction, so I see both sides where it's there's an owner who comes in and purchases a property and it's really beat up, just like a class D is what we call it property, just not very good, and they want to do the absolute minimum to it so they can cash flow, quote unquote cash flow. But really, it's just creating this cycle where their property's crappy, they're going to attract crappy tenants. We're going to try to manage it, and it's just going to be this cycle that's just going to be never ending. And their idea of cash flow is just out the door, and it just doesn't
Yeah.
make very
Okay.
much sense. So,
Yeah. Okay.
anyways, that's interesting. How I wish more people had that mindset from Australia and brought it here to the states of hey, just long term, just think long term because it will pay off. I mean, if the numbers make sense, it will
Yeah.
pay
Of
off,
course. Of
which
course.
it would. Now,
In
those
it.
Oh, go
So
ahead.
let me ask a question before we shift. So in the States, um, is it popular for people to flip houses? So you buy some old rundown thing, do a quick reno, and sell it. Is that popular? Is that something that you are involved in at all?
I have not done that personally, but there's a lot of people I'm in contact with who do that, and like there's people who create businesses just off that business
Yeah.
model alone. So super popular. Yeah.
And is it a pretty good way of making money in America?
It is, yes, if you know how to do it. No,
Yeah. Okay.
it can really screw you over if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah,
Yeah.
you can make some pretty serious money doing that. Fix and flips is what we call it.
So that's pretty non-existent in Australia.
Really?
Because yeah, because when you buy a property, so let's say you buy a $600,000 property in Australia, um, you're paying just to buy it. You pay what's called stamp duty, which is basically just a way for the government to tax you to buy property, right? For them to take a little piece of the pie. A $600,000
Right.
property, I think you pay like $20 or $30,000 in stamp duty. And
Whoa.
then when you sell, so let's say you do that, right? So you buy for 600 and it's some old rundown thing. Let's say you put $50,000 into it to renovate it, and let's say it
Right.
does become worth $700,000. Okay,
Okay.
from putting in 50 grand, and let's say you sell it for 700 grand. You then, when you sell a property, you have to pay capital gains tax, which is also a
Right.
tax that the government puts on you to sell it. So
Right.
you're
Same
paying
here.
a tax when you buy it, you're paying a tax when you sell it, and it eats up this like flipping conversation because the amount of money that you're going to make from flipping it is probably not going to pay off once you factor in the tax and stuff that you're paying. So yeah, that's something that you don't really see in Australia either. Recording in progress. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, I
Yeah.
can hear you. My phone overheated. I was in the sun for too long and
Oh,
it just got too hot. Okay, so I'm very curious to see what you have to say though. You're talking about capital gains. So when you buy the property, you're taxed. When you sell the property, you're taxed. What were we going on with that one?
yeah. So effectively, buying, renovating, and flipping properties just doesn't really pay off in Australia because of all the taxes when you buy a property and when you sell a property. That just eats away at the quick capital that you might make from flipping a property. So
Right.
yeah, I was bringing that up because my understanding is that it's kind of a popular, like I see the TV shows, Texas Flip 'em or whatever they're called, right? But it's just
Yeah,
something
for
that doesn't
sure.
really happen in Australia because of all like the taxes of when you buy and sell. Another reason why it's a long-term hold strategy in Australia, right? Buy today, keep it for 10 years type of a thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
the again that the fix and flip, you can make some serious money and transfer it over to, I mean, what people generally do is they fix, they flip, they sell. With that money, they then go buy something bigger, or they buy more units to flip, and it just gets more and more and more and kind of compounds up after that. But it sounds like in Australia, you'll that only really works if you find like the absolute perfect deal where you know you're going to make some serious money. Other than that, you're just not
Yeah.
making any money with that. Wow.
Correct. Yeah. You have to be
Oh,
timing the market pretty well, and finding a cheap, yeah, finding something undervalued in a moving market that you're gonna, yeah, it's quite difficult.
it's too
People
much.
don't really do it here. Yeah.
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 With your real estate though, do you has the in the US we keep really close pulse on like how the market's doing this month compared to how it did last year this same month. Do you guys have similar metrics in regards to, hey, we're actually doing really good or we're selling more? I don't know how that looks like for you exactly because you're on the investing side, right? So
Yeah.
you're not doing first time home buyer type deals, but how does the market look like in Australia versus how it looked like last year, even just a few months ago? Is it looking good? Is it looking the
Yeah.
same in that regard?
So the last maybe 2 years or so, and I think I think we're following a similar trend. In fact, I think Australia, as far as interest rates are concerned, has very much been following America. Basically, like what happens to you guys, we're like a couple months behind. So
Oh,
in
interesting.
that aspect, yeah, for the last couple of years, interest rates having gone up a lot, obviously slows the market down, right? So
Yeah.
like right now, we have interest rates of around like 6.5%. Whereas like a couple
Yeah.
of years ago, my mortgage was like 1.5% or something like that, right? Um, and
Wow.
so
Yeah.
like for me, my own personal mortgage on my property has pretty much doubled in the last 2 years just with interest rates. So
Ooh.
it puts a slowdown on the market because it costs people more to hold properties. Um, so yeah, the market has definitely slowed down the last couple of years. Prior to that, kind of coming off the back of COVID, property prices went through the roof.
Oh
Like so
yeah.
2020, 2021, 2022, property prices were absolutely booming. Um, uh, yeah, off the back of COVID. So although the market has slowed a bit, the couple of years before it started slowing, it was going gangbusters. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
it just kind of evens out, I guess. Yeah.
So you're saying that your mortgage has increased. Do you guys not have, so here in the US we have like a 15-year loan, 30-year loan. Do you guys have
Yeah.
something like that? Too?
So that's a big thing, and I know about this because one of my good mates, he's Aussie, he's Australian, but he married an American girl, and they live now in like Washington or something. And he was telling me, yeah, you can get like 30-year like fixed rates and stuff like that. That is not a thing here. So we do have fixed and variable.
Uh-huh.
Fixed. So when you're looking at fixed versus variable rates, banks banks or lenders will always do what's going to favor them, right?
Right.
So
Right.
right now in Australia, there's a sentiment that rates will probably start to come down over the next year or so. Okay. So banks, if you want a fixed rate, they are going to they're going to possibly fix it for the same as what rates are now, like the same as like a variable rate, but they know that rates are going to go down over time. So if you fix right now, you are going to be at a disadvantage, right? So in Australia, most people don't fix because banks will usually uh, up fixed rates. So like if I can get variable for 6%, fixed might be 6.2% or something, right? So most
Right.
people don't fix in Australia. However, in all that being said, fixed rates you can only usually get for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years. But if you're looking to fix for 5 years, like the bank's going to be asking for like 7%. So you don't
Oh,
usually fix, but usually only a couple of years. More than 5 years fixed does not exist in Australia. You cannot get 15, 20-year fixed rates. So like my friend who lives over there, he's got an investment property where the cost the rent that the tenant is paying covers his fixed mortgage, and he's fixed for like 30 years. So it's neutral cash flow. He knows for the next 30 years that that property's not going to cost him anything. That's like
yeah.
you do not have any of that kind of a surety here in Australia. Not at all.
That
Yeah.
is
So back to
that
the
is so different. Go ahead.
yeah. So back to the rates kind of conversation. So everyone is being affected by rates going up and down at the moment. I fortunately did fix my home loan when there was a little bit of sentiment that rates were going to increase. So
Uh-huh.
I had mine fixed at 2% um, for like 2 years. And when it came off fixed, rates at the time were like 4%. Right. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
was able to time it a little bit for some time, but they have
Yeah.
since gone from like 4 to 6, and I'm variable at the moment.
I gotcha.
But yeah, it's
And that's just common practice. Like you just got to deal with it. It's like, all right, well, looks like my interest rate's now higher. Deal with it.
correct.
Wow,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
difficult for me to understand. Um,
Yeah.
you
I would absolutely love if we implemented your like fixed rate system. That would be amazing.
Oh, yeah, it's nice because I think if we could implement more of the long-term mentality, you if you can afford real estate. So there's always conversations, the market's so good right now, and now's the best time to buy. You always hear real estate agents say the same thing over and over again. Um, I always say best time to buy real estate is when you can actually afford it, right? If you can afford it, if you can
There you
float
go.
for a few years, cool, do it. The benefit over here in the US is like, hey, maybe you're locked in at 6.5%. You can always refinance later down the road, right? But again, you have to be able to hold and maybe be okay in the red for a few years until you can refinance. And
Yeah.
then when you do refinance, you're at that 15 or 30-year loan. Anyways, uh, Australia is crazy. I don't know if I could do the variable loan. That'd be difficult for me.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
with you being in the more the investor side, do you own any investment properties yourself?
I do not currently. I mean, it sounds like I should. Um, so me and my wife bought our own home. I mean, look, to make excuses or anything, it's just it's hard to buy real estate in Australia. It's just so
Yeah.
expensive, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
we didn't get our own home until uh 3 years ago. When did we buy our place? About 3 years ago. Um, my wife also owns a hair salon. So starting her own business, injecting money into the business. And so we just haven't been in a position to get a
Yeah.
second property yet. But
Yeah.
again,
No,
like so many, it's a very good way to make money in Australia. I obviously believe what I preach to people about investing.
for sure.
We just haven't
Yeah.
been in the position to be able to do it yet. But yeah, hopefully in the
Yeah.
next maybe 12 months or so is something that we're looking at. Yeah,
Yeah. Totally get it.
yeah,
I'm actually on a very similar page. I own a property management company. I own a real estate company. I actually don't own a home yet. So when I talk to people, it's like, hey, so how many properties do you have? It's like, oh, I actually don't have any right now. I think, again,
yeah,
to your point, real estate is a good way to build wealth. There's also a lot of other ways. I mean, owning businesses, being in a business, having equity, your wife having that business herself, huge, right? That's just multiple ways to make money, and I think that's it's not just one way. Anyways, I thought that
yeah,
was interesting. Your wife. If you're okay, I want to hear about how you met your wife and the story and how that kind of took off from there.
yeah. Cool. So um, we met. I think we first met probably about a year after I came back from the States, which I would have been probably like 22, maybe.
Uh,
I met her at a church dance, um,
okay.
and she was quite funny. She'll probably never listen to this, but she was quite keen on me at the time. But I was
Okay.
actually so like we met, but I was actually more interested in another girl. But we kind of became friends, and we were friends for probably like a year and a half, maybe before we started talking a bit more, like before we went on like our first dates and stuff.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, from there, yeah, so that's kind of how we met, and then we would see each other at different like church events,
Yeah.
and yeah, then we started dating, and from when we started dating to when we got married was about 12 months, about a year.
Okay.
So we were dating for about 6 months before I proposed, and then we had like about a 6 month engagement, um, and we have been married now for got married in 2016, so coming on
Wow.
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Congrats. That's a big deal. That's a long time.
yeah,
With
yeah.
the timeline of events that you just told me, is that pretty average there in Australia? Because you were in the States, California, and the church. Like you marry somebody, you meet somebody, next month you're engaged, 2 months later you're married, 9 months later you have a kid. You know what I mean? So like the timeline
Yeah.
is so quick, not for everybody, but how does that compare to Australia?
Yeah, you do hear of that a little bit here, but I think my timeline is relatively typical. I think from when people start, particular, I should say, like in the church that I'm in, like if you don't go to church and like or my church or whatever, people will date for 10 years before they get married in Australia, right? And they'll live together for
Yeah,
like ever, maybe even have some kids before they get married, whatever. Right? It's pretty normal in
yeah,
in in my realm of people at my church and stuff. Yeah, I think 12 to 18 months is relatively typical from like when you start to when you get married. I think that's relatively typical. Yeah,
that makes sense. So
yeah.
pretty typical. Now, when you did go to California, and you went back to Australia, I'll kind of just change the topic here. I'm curious about your thoughts on when you left the States. Is there something that you missed that you kind of wish that was there in Australia? Or were you just so ready to go back to Australia that you didn't really miss too much from California?
Um, I mean, it's a good question. I'm sure it's been how long have I been home for now? I
It's been
think
a long time.
maybe like 11 years or something that I've been home. So, I mean, look, there is like like when it comes to like food, American like junk food, we don't nearly have as much of the kind of crap that you guys have. Like I freaking love Reese's peanut
Yeah.
butter cups. They're a bit more common. You could actually find them. Basically didn't exist in Australia. The only time I could get Reese's peanut butter cups was going to Costco. And Costco, when I first got back from the States, Costco was like brand new in Australia. So Costco's been in Australia for probably like 10 or 12 years thereabouts. So
Okay.
not
Yeah.
very long in the scheme of things. So you could get Reese's peanut butter cups from Costco, but you couldn't find them anywhere else. You can now find them at pretty much every grocery store. Um, but like stuff like that. So like um, yeah, Reese's peanut butter cups, like American like cereal. You guys have like 50,000 different cereals, cinnamon toast crunch, all
Yeah.
this stuff. Like you don't find that stuff in Australia. Um, so I miss that kind of
That's
aspect of
funny.
things. Um, I'm sure there's probably other things that I can't think of right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm
but
sure.
look, the reality is it's not too dissimilar. Like, I mean, I think the mindset of people is slightly different, particularly from a political point of view. At least like
Uh-huh.
from what I can tell of like my friends in Australia versus I'm friends with a lot of Americans on Facebook because I lived there for 2 years, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the general consensus of what it seems like most of my American friends believe from a political point of view is maybe what you'd say is the opposite in Australia. Um,
Uh,
so there's I think the mindset of people is maybe a bit different, but otherwise, like we're both Western countries that rich countries, I guess both countries. Um, yeah, so it's similar in a lot of aspects. So there's not
yeah.
not a lot of things that I would potentially miss because it's very similar. I would say if that makes
There's a lot
sense.
of similarities. That makes a lot of sense. Was there
Yeah.
ever a point in your life where you felt like you wanted to go back and live in the States, or you knew just Australia was always for you?
Sorry, say that again. You kind of cut out for a second.
Can you hear
Okay,
me okay
yes.
now? It is- Okay, cool. Yeah, my question was there ever a point in your life where you felt like you wanted to move back to the States, or was Australia always home for you?
Like, yeah, I did think about it, but I don't think it was ever really a strong consideration. I think, yeah, I don't think I ever. Look, kind of thinking about it as I'm talking. I think if I met a girl from America that I seriously was like wanted to like marry and like spend my life with, and she was like, "You have to move to America." That probably would have done it for me, I guess. But
Yeah.
I never, um, yeah, I've always wanted to stay in Australia, and Australia is my home. Yeah.
Man, we had some really good times over in Redlands. That was a man, if the mission president knew what was happening in that place, then he would have taken that place apart and never had missionaries living there. I mean, we weren't that crazy, but like it was not the most reverent at times.
Yeah,
My
yeah, yeah.
wife is
No,
I told her all about our summer sausage times, and she every time she sees a summer sausage, she just laughs. She's like, "Summer sausage, remember this? Do you remember that? Remember those times?"
I mean,
Yeah.
haven't thought about that since like you saying it just now. It's like, wow, I haven't heard that for ages. I do remember that now. Yeah,
Yeah, I will never see a summer sausage as like normal ever again. Like my
that is so
prayers
funny.
were like my back was against the wall, and I like feared for my life, and I'm trying to pray. I'm like, come on, give me some time here. Anyways,
That is
that was a
funny.
lot of fun.
It's funny. We're talking about California, and you're talking about like your phone overheating. It's like it's 9 degrees Celsius in where I am, and it's pouring down rain right now. It's like freezing. What's I'm trying to think Fahrenheit. What's freezing for you? What's freezing? Is it like 32 or something?
Yep, in the 30s, exactly right. Freezing
But
is
okay,
30s.
so it's probably right now. It's probably like maybe 45 or 45 degrees or so. Like right now where
Oh,
I
it's a little
am.
chillier.
I'm obviously in a
Oh
t-shirt because I'm in
wow.
a car and I've got the heater on. But yeah, and I don't know if you can tell, it's pouring down rain. The reason why, like, I'm looking at myself, it's so dark because it's so cloudy outside. It's probably not great for this, but anyway, yeah, I'd love to be in
The
California or Utah right now. It's yeah, it's not the best where
it's
I
hot
am.
in Utah right now. It's hitting the 90s. I'm roasting. I've got the AC blasting. Hopefully you can't hear the AC too much, but yeah, my phone, I keep on
Yeah,
touching my phone just to make sure I've got the vents pointing at it just to make sure it stays cool. But it is
yeah,
hot these
nice.
days in Utah.
Yeah,
Would would you and your wife ever come visit Utah or I guess anywhere here in the States? Any plans like that in the future?
yeah. So it's funny. We have been talking about it. My wife actually went not last year, the year before. She went with one of her friends. They went to California. They kind of did all around like LA, and then they also went up to like San Francisco, and then they drove to Vegas and came back. So they didn't go to Utah. But so my wife has. That's the only time that she's been to the state. I don't know if you probably don't remember this at all. My mum's American, so like I've been to America like heaps as a kid growing up. Um,
Oh,
uh, you may have not have ever known that, but
yeah, I
yeah.
didn't
So
know
like
that.
even before I was there with you 10 years ago, I've been to America a bunch of times. Um,
Oh, gotcha.
so but yeah, so she went for the first time 2 years ago. Um, we have been talking about doing a trip there. Um, we're just now kind of in this phase of our lives where we're kind of like timing like kids and stuff. So like, when do we want to have kids and like how does that fit in with like holidays? You call them vacations, same holiday vacation, we call it holidays. So
Yeah.
we might go next year if we're not pregnant. Um,
Ooh,
but
exciting.
yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, again, it's kind of one of those things where it's like a couple different factors, right? Like obviously, yeah, if we're pregnant, we're not gonna like go on 15-hour plane
Travel.
ride and whatnot. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah,
if
for
we're not,
sure.
then
Yeah,
it's definitely on the cards for next year. Um,
exciting.
the kind of the problem, I don't think my wife understands like how big America is. She's like, oh yeah, let's go to California, let's go to Utah, and then let's go to New York. It's like, yeah, okay, like you got to understand, like that we can't just do a quick little drive to New York from Utah. um,
Yeah.
and so it's like, okay, well, do we want to do the East Coast and the West Coast? Do we just want to do one or the other? Is it a long
Yeah.
trip? So are we going back to California and so that I can visit some of my people and Utah, some of my
Nice.
friends?
Yeah.
Or and do we then fly to New York? But then it's like, well, yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things that's like kind of hard to pick,
A lot
I
of
guess,
different
you know.
things
But
to That
Yeah,
makes
we'll
sense. A lot
see.
of different things to plan out. That makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
Well, I've got two questions for you, and obviously we don't have to end right now. Just kind of just depending on you, but two questions before we end this conversation. First one is kind of going back to what we originally talked about, like the old you, or I guess younger you versus you now. First question is, if your younger self saw you where you're at right now, how do you think they would react?
Um, Sorry, I like that you asked this question because I watched you ask this question to one of your other guests, the young guy that you went to high school with. Um,
Yeah,
I forget his name. He had the cool mullet
Jake.
going on. Um, so repeat the question again.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. So the question is, if your younger self saw where you are right now, how do you think they would react?
I think they would be shocked. Um,
Okay, tell me more about that.
I so I say this without sounding kind of bragging, I guess. Um,
No, let's hear it.
I, I just statistically speaking, I do earn a very high income in Australia. Um,
Uh-huh.
I think I actually read an article recently talking about like percentages, and I think I'm in like the top 2% of earners in
Awesome.
Australia, right?
That's
So I make
huge.
good money, and I didn't think I don't know if I ever thought I would make this kind of a money, and at the same time, I work from home full time. I actually don't work like I don't typical like working hours in Australia, like a 9 to 5 kind of job is like a 38, 40 hour working week. I work maybe maybe 20 hours a week.
Whoa,
And
whoa, whoa,
I've
whoa.
got a lot of flexibility with work and I earn good money. So I don't think I ever thought that this was like possible or realistic.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
Obviously,
And now,
looking at my high school self, I would have assumed by now I would have been married and had a house and stuff. But which I love. I love my wife,
yeah,
of course. Very happy. That side of things, like I kind of would have hoped and would have assumed by now that I would have that. But yeah, particularly from like just like an earning potential. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I think my younger self
The
would be shocked, very like pleasantly shocked. Yeah,
pleasantly shocked. I think that's a good way to put that. It's like, well, we're making how much, and we're only working how many
yeah,
hours, and we're married, and we're in this. That's awesome. Big congratulations on that. That's something to
correct.
be proud of. That doesn't come off braggy at all.
Uh,
The next question I have is, if you could go back to your younger self, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
oh, okay. Younger self piece of advice. Um, oh, give me a minute to think about that one. Advice. I mean, I don't, I don't think any of these are like particularly what I would call like home run one-liners, but like schooling, I don't, and it's probably not good advice to give people, but we talked about before, I was horrible at university. Like again, I make good money and I don't have a degree. Like I don't think if I was to give myself some advice, it'd be like I did. You don't need to put so much emphasis in schooling,
Yeah,
because although I did end up dropping out and not finishing my degree, it took me a long way. Like it took me a lot to get to that point of dropping out. Like I really did try and make it work, and you know, failing subjects and redoing years at uni and stuff. And I think in hindsight, you know, I think you can make good money without finishing a university course or something like that. Um,
see, you're going back to younger Curtis and just being like, don't even go to school, don't even try.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how it works in America, but we have so like university you don't have to pay for upfront. The government effectively like pays for it for you, and you then pay them back later in life as your income increases. So, for example, like if you
Okay.
go to university and it's $10,000 a year, you don't have to pay for that. You will start paying that back once you're earning like over $50,000 a year. You'll start to pay back like 1% of it. If you earn over 60 grand a year, you start to pay back 4% of it or whatever. And it kind of works out so that you just pay back like over time. Um,
Oh wow.
and so it's pretty good in that sense, but it's called a hex debt. I don't even know what that stands for, but so people do rack up like a hex debt. And it's also like indexed. So if inflation is going up, your hex debt is also increasing effectively with like
Oh.
indexing. So, so long story short, yeah, like although I didn't even have a degree, and I did have like a $20,000 hex debt that I had to pay back. Um, so yeah, absolutely, I would tell myself don't bother because you can save yourself 20 grand effectively. Um, and I mean, I think it
that's
was more than that,
that's
but yeah. Anyway,
no, that's I think that's great advice. There's a lot of people, I think at least here in the States, there's this shift going on where it's like you don't have to go to school. I mean, there's there's careers out there that are very specialized in, like, you do have to go to school, you do have to get the formal
of
education.
course,
I'm like you, I went to school for a while, and when it hit me is when I was getting my generals done. So kind of just like the entry level courses, classes. I was sitting in astronomy and I was learning about the stars and planets and all this bunch of stuff. And I was like, what what am I doing here? This is such a waste of time. I don't like I'm never
yeah,
going to use this information. I'm paying for this class. Like anyways, after that I just spoke with my wife and I was like, this isn't it. I'm not doing this. I'm dropping out. And luckily she was super supportive and she's like, all right, yeah, don't do it. You got to do something else. It's like, yeah. So figured something else out, but now I've got this student loans that I'm still paying off for a good
yeah,
degree that I
yeah.
never got, but whatever. So great
That's one
advice,
thing
I think.
In Australia, we don't do generals. So it's like a whole year that like I think on average our university courses like to get a degree are like 1 year less than the States because you don't do a
Oh,
year of generals. That's what 12 years of primary school and high school is about. That's the way that I see it.
yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah, seriously, what was all that time spent in high school? Like what anyways, it's crazy. It's
yeah,
just one big business trying to make money, and they're starting to lose the get a starting to lose the grip on people that they have, because everyone's realizing college is it's not for everyone. So
yeah,
anyway, it's
yeah,
kind of great stuff.
yeah.
So
I've
anyway,
thought of one more thing, one more piece of advice that I'd give myself.
oh yeah, let's hear
Um, I'm sure I'll probably think of more and more things as the day goes on. Um,
it.
but for me, networking. So, like, for me, where I've kind of worked my way up in like the corporate ladder per se, is
Yeah,
is by knowing people and becoming friends with people and getting jobs that way, as opposed to like yeah, just getting a job from finding an ad online or something. Like pretty much all the jobs I've gotten, particularly in the last couple of years, as I've kind of progressed up in this kind of real estate aspect, is
yeah,
is by knowing people. Yeah, just kind of the emphasis on keeping in touch and tabs with people, particularly kind of in this industry that you're working in.
yeah.
And that's how I've found a lot of my successes come from that way.
That's
Yeah.
huge. Tell me a little bit more about your networking. Like, is there something like a tip, a trick, a hack, or a secret, or whatever you want to call it? What's your biggest go-to method when you are networking with somebody or trying to network with people?
I think like so firstly, just kind of keeping in touch with people that you have like maybe previously worked with, or that work in the same space that you work in, just so that, like, they know that you exist, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think, to an extent, and I'll maybe clarify what I mean by that, to an extent, being relatively open with people. So, for
Okay.
example, um, my current boss is a friend of mine that I've known for a long time. I used to, when I told you what I was doing, the night job, when I was working two jobs, um,
Yeah.
he was this guy. His name's Nathan. He was the manager of the company that I was referring people through to buy investment properties. Right. He
Right.
also goes to the same church that I do, so that's kind of how I knew him from a personal point of view.
Okay.
He, I then subsequently started working for that company, but he had quit. Right. He had left already. We're friends. We've known each other for a long time. Anyway, last year, me and my wife went to Queensland, where he lives, another state in Australia, and we went to dinner with him and his wife, because our wives are friends and we're friends. We got to dinner, and he's asking me how my job is and everything, and I told him that I was looking to make more money, and that I was going to ask my boss for a pay rise. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, you got to be careful saying that kind of things to certain people, so that that kind of information is maybe something you want to make sure it's you're telling the right kind of
With the
person.
right
But
crowd.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. But yeah, I told him I want to make more money, and I was going to ask my boss for more money. Um, and he's like, yeah, cool, interesting. Like, that was kind of that conversation. Anyway, like a couple months later, he calls me, and he's like, "Hey, you told me that you were looking to make more money. Well, I'm about to start my own company, and I need someone to come on board with me. How would you like to come on board?" And kind of long story short, the
Ooh.
company that I now work for is his company. And yeah, I
Oh,
mean, I'm getting paid more than I was at my last job, and I'm also working from home full time, etc., etc. So,
right.
um, my point here is the fact that I was, in a way, kind of vulnerable with him at dinner, in telling him that I wasn't happy with how much money I was making and I wanted to make more money. He remembered that, and he then kind of asked me to become part of his company, and the rest is history, kind of thing. Um,
Wow.
so, not a hack per se when it comes to networking, but don't be afraid to be maybe what you might consider a bit vulnerable, with people,
Yeah.
because you never know what may come from it. Yeah.
True. Because could you imagine if you would have never said that? Maybe there was an opportunity that would have come up down the road, but the fact that you said that, that opened up the door for this. That's huge. I think that's
Correct.
great
Yeah.
advice. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. That is
Yeah.
awesome. I like that. Any other any other pieces of advice that have popped up in your head in the meantime?
No, I think that's. I'm sure there'll be lots more, but yeah, I think that's it for now. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Curtis, it feel well, first off, it feels weird calling you Curtis. I'm just gonna call you more. That's
Yeah. Wait.
yes, it's been
Yeah,
2 years.
Emil. Yeah, that's right. I'm used to calling you Showy Tattoo.
Showy tattoo. Oh man, I told that to my wife. Man, the things that I tell my wife, she just doesn't believe half of it. She's like summer
Yeah.
sausage, all that good stuff. Anyways,
Yeah.
well, I appreciate your time. I think it's been almost over an hour. These type of conversations, I love them because they just go by so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good conversations. And in a way, it's kind of networking too. That's kind of my quote unquote hack, right? I'm just opening up the door, having a lot more conversations one on one with people, which actually I really enjoy. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that being said, thanks for your time and coordinating this. Me being ignorant, didn't realize it was already Thursday for you, and so I was planning my call for tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I went after we were messaging earlier. I went back and looked through the messages, and you were right. So we had it scheduled for, like, in 24 hours, basically. But in my head, I don't know. Because when I was messaging you, I was like trying to make it into your time. So, like, yeah, Thursday at 4 p.m. for you. So I had Thursday in
Right.
my head, And yeah, like right
Yeah.
now it's quarter to 10 a.m. on Thursday. So yeah, apologies for the mix up.
Uh-huh.
That's my fault. But yeah, look, it's worked out. And yeah, it's
Yeah,
been
all
great
good.
chatting to you. And yeah, I love seeing, it's been good chat, been good catch up.
It really has. Yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
lot of fun. The next thing I wanna do is in about a year or 6 months, 8 months, whatever, I wanna revisit these type of conversations and just see how people are doing again, see how you're doing, if like, what
Oh yeah,
progression there's
cool.
been with your job, and did you come to the States? Maybe next time you do come next year, it's gonna be here next to me driving around. That would be a lot of fun. So,
Maybe
we'll have to
honestly,
revisit that.
like very plausible. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Then we can get you a root beer and, some Reese's
Yeah,
cups.
for sure.
And you
Yeah.
chow down. I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure it gets posted. So I'm excited to see the actual recording. I hope that everything turned out good. Again, I
Yeah.
wanna post this. I think this is a fun conversation. So shoot that
Yeah.
over, and, I guess we'll just go from there. So
Yeah, cool.
thanks again
Sounds
for your
good, man.
time. Okay, we'll see
Awesome.
you later, brother.
Catch ya.
Bye.
Bye.